6 o'clock news. I'm Angela Graves. I know you will be disappointed, but tonight we're going to switch up and not talk about politics. Our top story is on the Prader-Willi Syndrome. To cover this story, we have reporter Mr. Drew Kirschner live on site with biologist J.R. Ewing.
Thanks, Angela. I'm here in the lab with biologist J.R. Ewing, and we're learning more about PWS. So J.R., what is PWS?
PWS, or Prader-Willi Syndrome, it's a complex genetic condition that affects many parts of the body. Now, in infancy, this condition is characterized by weak muscle tone, feeding difficulties or a failure to thrive, very poor growth, poor development. But now it turns insidious because beginning in childhood, children or people with PWS develop an insatiable appetite. They can't stop eating. They're never full because the brain never received the signal that says I'm full. Well, now we're leading into obesity, type 2 diabetes. There's reports that children will eat anything. Tubs of lard, sticks of butter, frozen pizza. So many parents end up locking cabinets, chaining and locking refrigerators to prevent their children from getting into the cabinets at night.
So what are some signs and symptoms of PWS?
People with Prader-Willi typically have mild to moderate intellectual impairment, learning disabilities, behavioral problems are common, including temper tantrums. Now think about this, if you're hungry all the time, you want food, you're going to be angry. Distinctive features include short stature, small hands and feet. Some people with PWS have very fair skin and lightly colored hair. Now as educators, what we need to worry about, especially at mealtime, the child will use any and all means at its disposal to get more food. Stealing it from somebody else's plate, complaining that they're hungry. You can watch the child consume their lunch and they will come to you and say, I am hungry. You've been hungry, you know how you feel. They do feel that all the time.
Thank you, JR. That was very informative. You can also check out more information on PWS at medicinenet.com, U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institute of Health, ADAM, Medical Encyclopedia, and also, of course, you can also ask your local pediatrician. Back to you, Angela.
Thanks, Mr. Kirschner. Now we have a special report covering my interview with Miss Adams. Now we have Miss Adams here to tell us a little bit more about the personal side of the Prader-Willi Syndrome.
Yes, thanks, Miss Graves. I grew up next to a family of 5. One of the sons was named Connor Jackson, and he was born with Prader-Willi Syndrome.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the family dynamic was in the Jackson home?
Connor was a twin of my friend Jordan, and so I would go over there and hang out with them. They seemed like a very happy family, you know. Obviously, Connor was always a little bit different. They completely accepted his differences and kind of just showed him the things that he was good at.
What can you remember about Connor's experience in the school setting?
Growing up, I'm sure it was a little difficult because, you know, as 3rd and 4th graders, it's not always easy for little kids to understand why someone is different. Connor was always much bigger than me and my friends and everyone else that rode the bus, and we didn't know why. I'm sure it was a little tough. He always seemed a little bit on the outside of the social circles. He didn't always participate in class activities, kind of just sat in the corner on the outside. Everyone, you know, tried to be nice to him, tried to include him, but I feel like he might have preferred being separate from the social group, a little bit socially awkward, I would say. He usually had a paraprofessional with him too. He didn't spend all his time in the school with us. He spent kind of some time in his other classroom.
How's Connor doing now outside of school?
Connor didn't grow up and go to college like most of us. He kind of stayed at home after graduation, and then I actually spoke to Mrs. Jackson recently, and she told me that he spent about a year in a group home, came back, and she said it was just amazing the differences that it made, and how he has learned how to take care of himself and do things for himself. It made him a lot more independent, so she says he's very happy about that.
That's great. Also, as a future teacher, could you tell us a little bit about what we might do, or some suggestions that teachers could do for children that have this syndrome?
Dealing with any student with a disability, but especially Prader-Willi Syndrome, you need to be aware of their exceptionalities and what makes them different. Having, you know, emotional issues, tantrums are possible, and they can have OCD and all these other, you know, things that stem off of the Prader-Willi Syndrome. So just being aware and knowing, when to ask for help, because, special education teachers and paras, they will have training and they will be there with us to kind of guide us as teachers when it comes to dealing with students with learning disabilities and genetic disabilities and things like that.
Okay, thanks, Miss Adams.
Thank you.
Well, that concludes tonight's edition of Channel 9 News. Thank you and good night.